Starting off with Sonic the Hedgehog, there's a bunch of achievements that we're going to try and get through. In the initial playthrough, my thought was to try and get through the game without dying, if possible, but on the first playthrough of the game, to get through all the zones, collect as many of the end-of-level rewards as possible to get those achievements. I wanted to get all 6 Chaos Emeralds, because for whatever reason, after the first game, they decided there should be 7, but the first game only had 6. So, this run, the first playthrough, we figured we should be able to get 50 to 75% of the achievements. And in getting it started, we're going to be completing Green Hill Zone Act 1, and then we're going to be jumping into the giant ring coming up at the end of the zone here in order to try our first attempt at a Chaos Emerald. And we missed getting all of the emblems at the end of the stage, but those are easy enough to come back to and grab later on. Yeah, I don't know how many times I've lost over the years on the special stages, but never actually on the first one. So, given that's the case, we reset the game, we switched out kids, and decided to give it another try. Having failed at another time there, and just being the first act in the first level, we just kept resetting until we were able to continue to try it. So this time, without any kids, gave it a third shot, and hopefully third time being the charm would be able to pull through. With a little distraction out of the way and having grabbed some more coffee and substituted the substitute player who tried to take my place, we were trying to gather the second Chaos Emerald here after having finished Act 2. You'd be amazed how much trouble I had with the first special stage, for whatever reason, just to be able to come through on the second one and basically have no trouble with it at all. I mean, it took a while, but nothing like what happened with the first one where I had to reset the game multiple times. It was pretty crazy. With 2 Chaos Emeralds now in the bag and Act 3 going through without any issues or anything really remarkable happening, we come up to our first boss of the game. Beating Eggman here is going to allow us to go into Marble Zone, which is going to get us our level transition achievement. The floor is lava, moving from Green Hill until the second zone. Now right at the start of the Marble Zone here, we're going to be picking up our first achievement after we get past the lava and go into this little cavern below on the left. There's some ring boxes and little TV monitors hidden away here, giving us 30 rings, but it's going to go past 50 total. That super speed achievement is for getting 50 rings in the first 25 seconds of an act. Nothing else remarkable happened between then and the end of Act 1, so as we come up to the goal ring, we're going to be jumping in and trying to get our third Chaos Emerald of the run. After what was yet another unremarkable level and having gotten the Chaos Emerald, we get our score above the 100,000 mark, which gets us our next achievement, which is Alright High Score, as we move into the 4th Chaos Emerald level. Everything seems to be going smoothly in this run right up until this point, where I go past the one crab, get past the second crab, but then as I jump out right here towards the end of the level, I hit that spring and take damage from the enemy. So now I'm not going to have 50 rings as I come up to the end of the act. And for anybody who's played this game before, you know what it's like to have to try and gather 50 rings at the end of the level in Labyrinth Zone, or, heaven forbid, in Scrap Brain Zone, or even to an extent in Starlight Zone. So this was going to become a little bit of a pain later on, but really nothing we can do. We're not going to backtrack just to get rings. We just kind of continued moving onward with the run.
Labyrinth.
Yeah, so according to Google, that's how you pronounce the name of this zone. At this point, I've been playing long enough without having died that I thought, we have too many lives, so let's go ahead and just stand here and wait for Sonic's countdown to begin, and then we're going to go ahead and just lose a life because, hey, why not? No, obviously we weren't going to do that considering we're trying a no-death run, but you do get an achievement, Oxygenated Hedgehog, for jumping out at the very last moment, so we're basically just waiting for that. I do think the spirit of that achievement is to try and get an air bubble at the very last second, but it triggers if you just sit literally right below the surface and then jump out of the water for air. Now, to be perfectly honest, I'm not exactly sure how it took me this long into the run to collect 100 rings, but once we surpass the 100 ring mark here, we're going to get our ring collector achievement. It seems kind of odd that it would take until this zone, but maybe because some of the acts are shorter, and there were a couple acts where I took damage, but either which way. And with this last Chaos Emerald out of the way, we get our Got Them All achievement. To this point in the run, we still haven't died either, so the Deathless run is still intact. We may be able at this point to get through both of these in one sitting, which would be absolutely perfect. I'm not entirely sure why the boss is going running up this kind of mountain vertical challenge area instead of actually having to fight Eggman. Either which way, the water level comes up, there's no air bubbles. The whole idea is just to get to the top before you drown. Die from the spikes, I suppose. But it's definitely one of the easier bosses in the game. It's just one of the simple platforming. Again, I don't really know what the overarching point of this was, but once you get up to the top, you don't even have to hit Eggman, you can literally just run over the gaps. I hit him because, hey, it's fun. But still, you really don't need to. Starting to think that this is going to be a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. We're going to be able to get through the game entirely. However, taking damage there, I fell down the pit and died. So I was going to have to start the run entirely over in order to beat the game without dying. Contemplating it there, if not just contemplating it myself. However, that being said, I decided I didn't want to collect all the Chaos Emeralds again, so I went ahead and just decided let's finish the run. Got damaged again, died again. And at this point, I did start to realize this is going to be a lot harder to beat the game without dying than I really thought. I have absolutely nothing to say in this entire zone other than who designed it, why did you design it, and please don't ever, ever, ever do this ever again. And with the last hit being delivered, we beat the game for the first time. We're going to pick up a few achievements along the way here. One of which is going to be take out the trash, which is for beating Robotnik or Eggman, and another for complete victory, getting all the Chaos Emeralds. And from here, it was time to try and get through Green Hill Zone with only 1,000 points. Now, with the vast majority of achievements out of the way, I figured it's at this point around now we're going to have to go back. That got us pit stop. We're hitting 4 checkpoints and do the hardest of them all, which is South Island Champion. Complete all acts of the game without dying. If you die, you have to reset. So I had a ton of runs to try and get this. The first one, unfortunately and sadly enough, I died in months. My second run through, I managed to get all the scrap rings and fell to my feet. On the next playthrough, which was later that evening, as we were trying to I got stuck at this point here where I couldn't climb high enough fast enough. And I drowned. Making it back to the labyrinth zone on my next playthrough, I kind of ran into similar trouble where I missed the brick going up and effectively got soft locked. Everything down and I drowned. The next day I tried another playthrough right from the start. Once again, made it back to the zone. Once again, very close to oxygen at the top, however. I drowned. This one was extremely frustrating because I had a really good playthrough, made it to scrap 3 in Act 3, got hit with the spike ball, and decided to take it out on the controller by mashing it against the bed. To be fair to me, Miss Rachel was on in the background and gave me a little irritable for back on the side. Jumped a little bit too far on that one, got hit by the spike ball. Just to get back to scrap rings up and get here, and this time I jumped. All through these, about 30 or so minutes on average, until we were finally able to get on a run. And there you have it. That was the hardest challenge of the game. However, with that being beaten, we were able to fully master Sonic the Hedgehog. And with that, we're just going to kick back, relax, and watch the credits.